various parts, we've also heard, what is health? Do we need to challenge the definitional identity of what is health?
Yeah, great. Well, thank you for having me here. And it's really an integral question. And coming from the Denenukwe First Nation, which is Indigenous peoples in the northern part of Canada, we have a very specific definition of health that has been embodied for thousands of years. And that notion of health is absolutely interconnected with the planet and with planetary health at a fundamental level. So this idea of how we've defined health within Western health systems has been very siloed. In fact, the World Health Organization definition is based on the complete attainment of health within mental, emotional, and physical spheres, yet there's no real alludement to the dependence of that interactive individual health being completely and utterly dependent on a healthy planet. So in my mind, this reframing, even within the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, we have them list very linearly, where we have elements of clean water, we have elements of health, yet really fundamentally, most of the SDGs are actually dependent on a few key ones. The health of the planet, yet we don't see them within this structured way of interconnectedness. We've siloed them in different models, which has created us problems and fundamentally created a knowledge system which thinks that it can operate in little bundles and elements in different places, which is counterintuitive to the health and well-being that we've seen for thousands of years in our Indigenous communities.
So Indigenous communities have been living for thousands of years in complete balance with the planet. And many of these communities, for them, the first line of healthcare is the Indigenous knowledge. Right? Mm-hmm. How would you see that being integrated into the mainstream medical industrial complex?
Mm-hmm. Well, if we just take a moment to step back and think about the healthcare industry generally, because traditionally, healthcare has not been included in the national contribution to the determinants, for carbon emissions. It's just been this last year where 194 countries finally included their healthcare impacts within their carbon determinations. But the realistic element is that the healthcare industry on whole in the globe contributes about 5% of the global emissions. And in fact, that's double the aviation industry, yet we put more efforts on transport than we do within healthcare. If healthcare is its own country, it would be the 5th largest emitter on the planet, wow, including hundreds of thousands of tons of pollutants each year. So this exclusionary nature of healthcare has developed with the assumption that healthcare is a cost that we can burden because it's our own well-being.
Right.
But what that is really saying is that humans are the top of the hierarchy, the top of the triangle, which is a very anthropocentric, human-centric kind of view. And we've created our health system in that way, mm-hmm, where everything is based on the health of the human. Even our scientific research questions have the implicit or even explicit assumption that we're doing things for human benefit. Yet if we look at Indigenous traditional medicine systems, humans are looked at it as one very small part of a larger system. This eco-centric sort of approach, this holism, this dynamism that comes in. Two fundamentally completely different ways that we view the world, and therefore two completely differential ways how we've created health systems. The Western way, we're devoid from the planet. The Indigenous way, where everything is completely dependent. In fact, when you get a prescription from a traditional medicine healer, knowledge keeper, in the determination for that prescription is the health of the planet. In fact, we have some medicines that if we pick them too much, they will go away. But if you don't pick that medicine, they also go away. So they actually need the human touch, the human stewardship. But it's a lesson in that fine balance in the middle where we don't take too much, but we also don't ignore nature at the same time. Being stewards within our healthcare systems is the natural element of change, I think, that we're needing to happen. I think I'm getting all fuzzy here.
Yes, I think we need tech support here. Welcome to the interconnected world of conferences and panels. It's technology. Hello? We're going to get there, right? We needed a little bit of drama.
Yes, yes.
Of course.
The
Are you back
technology components. But so as we think about learning lessons from traditional medicine systems for Western healthcare, you know, we really see our systems as being inherently complex, and we embrace that. We embrace the complexity. We work in holistic ways, so we think about all of the components and the platforms that come in, including the planet, in every single decision that we make within our traditional healthcare systems. And there's an argument, I think, for those things to be absolutely achievable within Western healthcare systems. And we're starting to see the conversations today, as we've seen. And in fact, 5% of that global emission component of healthcare, the majority of that is actually in the supply chain and pharmaceuticals. So there is opportunity for strategic thought where what I've heard is this is the first change now that we've actually had health as a conversation. In my mind, that is in itself a problem, demonstrates the problem, where if we're 2024, and this is the very first time that we're actually having a health conversation in the context of sustainability, we are failing. We are absolutely failing. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, a lot of creativity. We have a lot of brains in this room. How can we actually move things forward in a good way for the health of ourselves, but also the health of the planet?
I think it's very well said. I want to ping your brain a little bit and ask you, as a leader of Indigenous medicine typically works in upstream preventative measures. Is that true? Mm-hmm. And isn't that a role we heard in the panel coming up again and again? How do we start preventing rather than just dealing with the outcome of? Mm-hmm. And could you talk a little about it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something I think in Western societies we've become so dependent on getting a pill to make us well. We've been so dependent on going to others with a certain set of skills to be able to make us well. Whereas in our communities, the only reason why we've survived for thousands of years is by taking self-responsibility for our health and well-being, working together as a collective community, recognizing that if one person's not healthy, the community's not healthy. So how can we bring that collective effort together? And then number two, understanding the relationship to the health of the environment, and the focus being squarely fixated on the acknowledgement that if I'm a human body sitting here on the stage right now, I'm made of 60% water. The cells in my body turn over about on average every 3 months or so. So if I'm living in my home region by a big lake called Tucho, or Great Slave Lake, after about 3 months of living there, I become that lake. Every single one of you are the rivers and lakes of where you come from, because your bodies are 60% water. That embodiment of our interconnectedness that we say within our Indigenous traditional medicine systems are not just a metaphorical or a symbolic conversation, it's a physiological reality. So if the water's not well, you are not well. If the water's well, you are well. So this interconnectedness is innate. It is within every single one of us. Imagine where those water molecules have been in the world. Maybe they were traveling in a river in Africa, going through the sky waves into Brazil. Thousands of years of recirculation of water molecules that are sitting in everyone's bodies here today. There's a power in re-narratives that we have within our traditional medicine systems that remind us that we are in and of itself nature and not separate from it. And how we define our policies are really going from that place within our medicine systems.
No, that is beautiful. So how do we, a society which could ideally combine these perspectives could be a successful society, right? Because that's when we would have a healthy planet, we would live in planetary balance, and we would not hopefully be having these conversations. So how do we create a trajectory that is sustainable?
Well, there's been conversation, and I've heard it today in other circles, we need systemic changes. People keep saying that, but what does that actually mean in practice? I've heard this for 10 years. We need systemic changes. We need changes. People keep saying we need changes. We've had a system for thousands of years in our communities. We don't need a system change. We have the answers in how to live and heal sustainably. Indigenous peoples make up right now about 6% of the world's population, yet we host 80% of all of the remaining biodiversity left on the planet. Our systems don't need to be changed. We have exemplars there that have been working, yet we're ignoring them with the hegemony of Western scientific practice that often presumes expertise in certain levels, yet that expertise is killing us right now in terms of a trajectory on the planet. So we really need a reawakening. It's not a systems change in my mind. It's a reawakening to systems that are already there and have been working for thousands of years, and looking towards those systems as bridges. Because I'm not interested in trying to integrate Indigenous traditional knowledges into our healthcare system or even into Western knowledges, because in my mind, integration is assimilation. Why aren't we doing the other way around and saying, how can Western systems actually fit into our Indigenous systems? That's a new way of thinking that hasn't really been thought about in the context of health. So in my mind, the answers are there. They've always been there. We've just been disconnected from them, just like we've been disconnected to the narratives that I shared about our interconnection with our water bases. There's a lot of opportunity for hope that we see in our communities, but right now, we're not amplifying those voices and platforms sufficiently in my mind.
And what would help us amplify those voices and platforms? Because very too often we have leaders coming here who are not mainstream, if I may say that, and you're working off the side of your desk with skimpy capital. What would that dream capital look like? What would that dream situation look like?
Well, you're absolutely right. We know very clearly that the majority of climate finance as well as climate projects very little goes to Indigenous communities. I think it's 0.2% or something, of the investments there. We need to humble ourselves as a Western society and community, really recheck our positionality in the world, because most of the narratives I hear within these kinds of spaces is that we need to go help and support vulnerable communities. Indigenous peoples are not vulnerable, they are marginalized. They've been marginalized for thousands of years. They have the solutions and the answers, and we need to figure out better ways to mobilize the answers they already have, instead of assuming that we have the answers forward from them. That's a recheck. That's a humbleness that our elders have taught us for thousands of years, is to come in acknowledging the strengths and wisdom of each and individual person and community, to be able to learn how to listen in a good way, and to be able to partner with solutions that are existing on the ground, and figuring out ways as allies with privilege. I have privilege sitting on this stage. We all have privilege being in this room. How do we be able to leverage that privilege to amplify voices and solutions that don't get the kinds of platforms that we have? So because of that, there's some very small steps that could be taken, which is that, stepping back, and allowing Indigenous voices and other marginalized voices to be heard. That is an act of power itself, because it's power to be able to have the confidence to step back and allow other voices to be heard.
That is fantastic, yes, and I think that definitely deserves a round of applause. If I asked you for the one last wisdom, we talked a lot before this one on our panel about the role of AI and technology. And if I may say that Indigenous people kind of already had the technology in their own story. Their story shared with us, perhaps a technology which we're still trying to discover. How would you answer that?
Yeah, the technology piece is an interesting one, and it really reminds me, I was at a Wall Street event a number of years ago, funny context, but it was talking a little bit about the changes that we're seeing, and I remember seeing all these young climate activists, which of course are doing amazing things. All of them were on their phones, sitting there, typing away, and I kept listening to their narratives, like I've heard here, a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety. And I kept thinking to myself, how do we create solutions from a place of fear and anxiety? And how do those solutions differ from creating solutions based on a sense of love for the planet? Because in our Indigenous communities, our solutions come from a place of love and interconnection from the climate.
And abundance.
Exactly. But then you see a lot of these young people acting out of fear and anxiety, and I really wonder, do they know what they're protecting? Do they know what they're fighting for? Are they fighting for her, or are they fighting for themselves? And how does that actually change the kinds of solutions that we think about? It's something to reflect on very deeply, the origins of how we actually think about moving forward in a good way. So because of that reflection, I think, I often, sit and wonder and see the mechanical kinds of solutions that we're starting to see. Are they truly fundamentally interconnected to the notion of our planet being ourselves? Or are we continue to divorce ourselves by the saying that I'll often state, you can't create solutions to complex problems from the same worldview that created it in the first place?
That is absolutely perfect and beautiful. So if I gave you a magic wand, my last question. I keep saying last, and I keep cheating. If I gave you a magic wand, what would you do? What would be the one thing that you'd want to change?
I would love to be able to take every single person back to my home community with my elders, and to have my elders put their hands on the earth and to feel her while they're singing. Because those moments of interconnection are so few and far between within our Western societies, and we forget on the power of what it actually means to connect what we're fighting for. And remembering that it is because of a love and appreciation, as we're birthed from our mothers and our umbilical cords are cut, our umbilical cords are transferred to the earth for our sustainability and our survival. We need to bring back those scenes of reconnection, the senses of interconnection for all of us, because in my mind, that is what it's going to take to create long-standing change.
I have nothing more to say except to say thank you. Thank you for bringing tremendous wisdom and tremendous knowledge. We have 3 minutes, and this is unusual, but would anybody in the audience like to ask Dr. Redvers a question? It is very seldom we get so much knowledge sitting up on stage. I'm sure they're going to bulldoze me. Absolutely, go for it. I'm going to borrow your mic and ask you to stand up, my dear, and come here so you can speak in the mic.
Oh, you want me to be?
No, you can just ask the question. Here you go. And give me back the mic when you finish.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so my question is, as you mentioned, that most of the diseases are from within. So recently, I had this discussion with one of the dermatologists. They said even acne come from within. If your body anatomy is different, even if we give you the medicines which are available here, might not work on you. So I think from that day, I tend to realize that there is something related to disease and anatomy, and this is what you discussed. Also you discussed about the rare diseases, right? So what is the percentage of our, in relation of our anatomy of our body to the diseases? Like, how much do they relate to each other?
Yeah, I think there's a few notes there that's important that at least come from our communities, is understanding the distinction between cure and healing, which are two very different things. We have a lot of attempts for cure within Western medicines, but not a lot of understanding of healing, health, well-being, and healing. And that's problematic. The second thing is that in our Indigenous traditional knowledge systems, because of our interconnectedness to Earth, we often look for features within our being of who we're born from when we're very small. In fact, our elders often know right from we're very small the kinds of issues that we might be challenged with based on the kinds of constitutions that we're born with. And I know that's similar in other kinds of traditional medicine systems like Ayurveda with the doshas and different constitutions. So we see similarities with other kinds of traditional medicine systems. But ultimately, I think, when it comes to the way that our elders talk about healing, as you noted, it comes from within. Even if you might not be cured from a disease, there's a possibility to cure and go back to what we call our walk in the sky world in a different way, coming back better. And there's a lot of mechanisms that we have in our communities to be able to do that, to reintegrate ourselves so that we're feeling well despite perhaps not being cured. It's an interesting conversation. I think we need more attention towards that in our Western healing systems, which we've kind of forgotten.
Brilliant. Can I take one more question?
Yes, Jen.
Hello, thank you for your talk, which is very different from the rest. I have a question about traditional medicines, which exist in different parts of the world. I do spend a lot of time in the Himalayas, And of course, I do see practices. And I've been starting to read also practices and also research, for example, on ayahuasca, with the treatment of mental diseases. So I don't know whether you refer to this type of environment. And then because you belong to this community of indigenous people, if I understand well, what is, like, I'm a nutritionist, so I'm just wondering, what is the public health data basically about, community that is really handling medicine or healing through traditional ancient ways versus somebody who is going to allopathic, regular curing system. And also, this is my last point, sorry, but I don't know if it's right or not, but I found out that the pharmaceutical industry go and look for original plants, original active compounds that they reproduce into a medicine in order to be curing whatever diseases. So that's a lot of things, you choose whatever you want to answer to, but thanks for your comments, and thanks for saying we have the change within us, and we all agree we should change, but we should have more discussion here on this platform of Change Now. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, just briefly, because I know the time is coming short, traditional medicines are often forgotten about in the biodiversity conversations, particularly when it comes to forest conservations and the importance of access for traditional medicines for Indigenous peoples. In fact, we've had a number of Indigenous communities in the last year forcibly evicted from their traditional homelands due to carbon credits schemes, particularly in Kenya and Tanzania, which has created a lack of access to our medicines. 70 to 80% of the world's population, maybe 60 to 70, rely on traditional medicine as a primary form of health care. And in fact, the traditional medicine group now at the World Health Organization is starting to recognize the importance of biodiversity and health and its connection to the majority of the population on the planet's well-being. There's a lot of risk that comes with Indigenous traditional medicine specifically, and a lot of lack of trustworthiness due to previous extraction of knowledge around medicines and formulations of use into pharmaceuticals that creates complicated policy environments, including things like aspirin, which is noted to be found and formulated by bear, but of course that was one of our medicines for thousands of years in our area. So it's a very complicated area. There's a lot of things to say about it, but ultimately I think we just need to remember in these kinds of spheres, when we talk about biodiversity, it includes the pharmacy for 60 to 70% of the people on the planet.
Thank you. I think that was brilliant. Would you please join me in thanking Dr. Redvers for a phenomenal talk? And you can find her after the stage and definitely ask her more questions.
Merci,
Thank you. Thank you so much.